Well, hello and welcome. I'm glad that you're with us as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Today, we're going to complete our reading of Deuteronomy. That means that also that we complete our reading of the Pentateuch, or the first five books of the Bible, the five books of Moses. In chapter 33 of Deuteronomy, we read the final blessing of Moses on Israel. The blessing is given sometime between the time of the announcement of his impending death, of Moses' impending death, that we read in our read about in our last session, and the account of his actual death that we will read today. The words of the blessing appear to have been recorded by someone other than Moses, probably a scribe who recorded as Moses spoke that blessing. We don't really know for sure, but it seems quite clear that Moses didn't actually write this, that someone wrote this who was listening to him. The blessings are introduced with a brief history of the relationship between Israel and Yahweh, her king. By the way, you'll see the term in there, Yeshurun. Yeshurun. It's actually a poetic term for Israel. As you're reading along, it might confuse you. It's like, where did that come from? Well, it's just a poetic term that's used, and it refers to Israel. Anyway, now there's 10 blessings in all. Some of the blessings are long, some of the blessings are short. Interestingly enough, the tribe of Simeon is missing. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are joined together under the blessing for Joseph. The blessing closes with a hymn of praise, a hymn that expresses the blessed state of Israel under Yahweh. Then we move on from there to the final chapter, chapter 34. It's obviously added after Moses' death. We're not really sure exactly who wrote it. There's a number of different suggestions out there. Some say Joshua, some say Eleazar, some say who was the high priest. Others say that it may have been added by someone at a much later date. But basically what we do is we read about Moses viewing the land of the promise from Mount Nebo. We read that Moses dies there, that he's buried by God himself. By the way, the fact that Moses isn't just left honors Moses. His lifeless body will be raised with all the rest of us on the last day. God takes the time and the effort to bury that body, to show it respect. And the writer also notes that Moses was strong and vigorous at the time of his death, which he was 120 years old at that particular point in time. After Moses' death, Joshua assumes the leadership of Israel as God had commanded. Joshua is full of the Spirit that God has, the Spirit of God that has been placed on him because Moses had laid his hands on him when he commissioned him. The book closes with words of honor and praise for Moses, a servant of God. As we leave the book of Deuteronomy and as we leave the Pentateuch, Israel is prepared to enter the land of the promise. There's no question that great danger awaits them. Remember, the spies that had gone in 40 years earlier saw this and came back saying, there's no way we can do this. Well, nothing's changed except that Israel is operating under the promise of God. God has promised to be with them and to prepare the way before them. Psalm 91, which we're reading today, is a psalm for those in danger. It actually echoes the song of Moses that we read just the other day. It gives encouragement to those who put their trust in Yahweh, no matter what the danger may be that confronts them. The psalm reminds us that even in the face of death, we have the privilege of resting in God's protection. You're likely to recognize the verses in this psalm that the devil yanked out of context as he tempts Jesus to jump from the highest point of the temple. But it's appropriate to read a psalm like this at times like this, when people are preparing to do what God has commanded them to do, trusting in God to accomplish his purpose through them, in spite of the odds that may seem to be stacked against them. And so we read this psalm today in anticipation of what is to come, the conquest of the land of the promise by Israel against all odds, based solely on God's promise that he will be with them and that he will deliver the land to them. As you read this psalm, May God grant you comfort in the battles that you face as you live your life according to his will and according to his promise. For it is God alone who gives strength to do his will and protects us in the battles that he directs us to fight. May God be with you and bless you. Pray that you continue to grow in your readings. I look forward as we gather again next to our beginning the book of Joshua, the book of the conquest of the land that God has promised to Israel.